What's going on, everybody? This is Dean with East Coast Overland Adventures, coming to you with another video on the Overland Expo channel. And in this video, we're going to be going over how to plan a trip. So we're going to be taking a look at what are some of the different resources out there, what are some of the different information that you need to know about traveling on a trip, and then how do we combine it all into actually getting ready to go out on an adventure. Now, in this example, I'm going to be looking at the Mid-Atlantic Backcountry Discovery Route. Why? Well, because I'm East Coast Overland Adventures, and this is an East Coast route. Now, the nice thing about the Backcountry Discovery Route series is they are a pre-planned route. So in this case, this one goes from the Virginia-Tennessee line all the way up to the Pennsylvania-New York line. Now, this map is amazing. Now, the nice thing about this map is it covers the entire route, but it's also broken down into sections. So on this side, we have the entire route, but then it's broken down by section, and they're actually blown out by section corresponding to the route. Now, this is just one layer of our trip. So the first thing we want is like, okay, we're gonna do this entire trip. So now we got this information. You also wanna look at some of the other resources that are out there. Now, this right here is an atlas, also known as a gazetteer. These things are great because normally they give you a lot of information about a specific state, but this one in particular is unique because it covers the Southern Appalachian region. So if we flip over to the back, it actually covers parts of Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland. And if you notice, it's nice on this nice sharp angle here, which happens to correspond and overlap with the Mid-Atlantic Backcountry Discovery Route. So these are two great resources to pair together because they kind of overlap and cover the same area. One of the other things that's a great resource is something like a state DOT map. Now, as you start planning your trip, you can use all of these resources to kind of give you ideas on places to go, things to see along the way. So even if you have a pre-planned route with something like the Mid-Atlantic Backcountry Discovery Route, if you want to venture off of that and explore some of the other areas, you can do that. And that's where things like National Forest Service maps and other specialty adventure maps come into play because you can kind of use all of these resources. So when you start looking at doing a trip like this, one of the things you have to decide on is, well, how long are you gonna take to do it? How long is the trip itself? And your biggest expenses, which are gonna be fuel, food, and any fees that you may incur along the way. So as an example, this route is 1,080 miles. The biggest expense for this trip is going to be fuel. Now, if you're looking at traveling in other areas, this one's here in North America. So if you're gonna be traveling in North America, you can anticipate anywhere from $3,000 to $4,000 per month to travel. If you're traveling in, say, the second world, like maybe Central America, South America, you're looking at anywhere from $1,500 to $2,500 a month. And if you're traveling in, say, a third world country, somewhere it's a little less developed, you can travel on as little as $1,500 a month or less, depending on the type of vehicle that you're traveling. Now, here in the United States, obviously fuel is going to be very, very expensive. So when you're looking at a trip like this, one of the key factors you need to know is how far can you drive? Now, the best habit you can get into right now that's gonna help with planning future trips is zeroing the odometer on your vehicle and calculating what your fuel mileage is. So for me, my Jeep gets 10 miles per gallon. This is a 1,080 mile trip. I'm looking at about 100 gallons of fuel to do this entire route. So that's gonna have a very hard impact on what my budget for this trip is gonna be. So I know I've got to do 100 gallons worth of gas. Average price right now is around $3.50 to $4 a gallon, depending on where you're at. So I can anticipate spending at minimum $300 to $400 in fuel to do this trip. Now, that's just one of the variables, because if I'm doing this trip beginning to end, that's how much fuel I'm gonna spend. But that doesn't necessarily mean how much time I'm going to take to do this trip. If I wanted to do this trip in one day, I could do it. I've driven 1,000 miles in one day, but it's not very fun. If you're gonna do a trip like this and you want to explore and you want to kind of get off the beaten path, or maybe you want to stop and go for a hike, or maybe you're into boating or mountain biking or any other fun activities that you want to do when you're in this kind of area, you want to figure out what your pace is going to be. Now, for me personally, I don't like traveling more than 100 miles a day when I'm doing this kind of trip. So with a pace of 100 miles per day, I'm looking at about 10 days to do this trip. So now I can look at the next part of my budget and my plan, and that's how much food I'm gonna need. So if I'm doing a 10-day trip, 3 meals per day, I'm looking at 30 meals. And this is another variable that's gonna impact kind of how you plan your trip is, well, are you gonna be eating out along the way? Are you gonna be cooking? Are you going to be just kind of dirtbagging it, maybe just eating granola bars and peanut butter and jelly? But that's how you can now start to figure out what your expenses are gonna be and how much stuff you're gonna wanna carry. Now, when you combine these two, I know I'm gonna travel 100 miles per day. I know my Jeep gets 10 miles per gallon. I happen to have a 31-gallon fuel tank, which gives me a working range of about 300 miles, 100 miles per day. That's 3 days of fuel. So when you think about how much food you're gonna have to carry, well, I only carry 3 days worth of food. So now I know if I'm doing a trip like this, that's gonna take me roughly 10 or 11 days, I know I'm gonna be doing it in basically 3 groups of 3 days with an extra bonus day tacked on the end. So I know I'm gonna be carrying 3 days worth of food, 3 days worth of fuel. So now we can look at the third variable, and that's going to be water. Now, the average person consumes approximately 1 gallon of water per person per day. You can increase that when you're in a hot, more arid environment. So if you're, say, out west, you might be looking at anywhere from 2 to 3 gallons of water per person. You're also gonna need approximately 1 gallon of water per person for cooking and cleaning per day. And if you wanna take a shower, you're looking at anywhere from 3 to 5 gallons of water per person per shower. So if you start adding that up, if I tried to carry enough water for an entire 10-day trip, let's see, I need 1 gallon to drink, 1 gallon to cook, 3 gallons to shower. You know, we're looking at 5 gallons of water per day. I'd have to carry 50 gallons of water. That's not very practical. But if we go back and we look at, okay, I'm only doing 3 days worth of food and 3 days worth of fuel. Well, now I can look at 3 days worth of water, which drops that number from 50 gallons down to a more manageable, say 10 to 15 gallons of water. Now, one of the nice things about these pre-planned routes like the Mid-Atlantic Backcountry Discovery Route is along here, they actually mark out where all of the different gas stations are, where the grocery stores are. So from somebody who's just starting out, this is a great resource because it tells you all of those things. So I know in every section of this route, I know where the gas stations are and I know where the grocery stores are, which means it's very unlikely that I'm gonna run out of fuel, and it's very unlikely that I'm gonna starve to death, and I've really never been to a gas station or a grocery store that didn't sell water, which means I'm not gonna die of dehydration. So that's kind of how you can look at something like this and calculate your basic, kind of your plan is to basically come up with, you know, what's your fuel, that's gonna be your biggest expense, which is gonna be your food, that's gonna be your next important one, and then your water. And then lastly, we need a place to stay. And as overland travel enthusiasts, more than likely we're traveling like a turtle with our home on our back, whether it's in a vehicle, with a trailer, with a rooftop tent, or by motorcycle with a ground tent. So along here, one of the nice things about this route is it also gives you all the different places you can camp. And then that's also where things like the atlases and gazetteers and your national forest and adventure style maps, because if I open one of these maps for like say Monongahela National Forest, all of the different campgrounds as well as all of the different primitive campsites are gonna be marked in there, meaning I can come up with a pretty comprehensive plan of where I'm gonna be getting food, where I'm gonna be getting fuel, and where I'm gonna be spending the night. To kind of wrap things up, one of the encouraging things I will tell you that if you're just starting out and you're gonna be traveling in North America, well, you're never more than 100 miles away from a McDonald's. I know that's a staggering statistic, but that's actually the reality. If you're traveling in the lower 48 states, even southern Canada and northern Mexico, you're never more than 100 miles away from a McDonald's. I've never been to a McDonald's that wasn't near a gas station or a grocery store. So again, the likelihood of you running out of fuel or running out of food or running out of water is extremely low. The other thing to consider is that the average person living in North America only travels in a range of 30 miles away from their home, meaning you have all of these circles all across the country that are only 30 miles across, and within that 30 miles, you're gonna find gas stations, grocery stores, restaurants, places to sleep, places to stay. So again, when you're just starting out and you're trying to get your feet wet, get your first trip under your belt, going with something like this and using all of these different resources to put together a plan is gonna be relatively easy and hopefully take a lot of the burden of fear off of you so that you can get out there and have a good adventure. I've been Dean with East Coast Overland Adventures. This has been a trip planning video with Overland Expo, and we hope to see you out there.